Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Montgomery High School class of 2026 college search process webinar for parents. I am Keith Glock. I am one of the high school counselors. And I want to give you the presentation that we had given to the current juniors a couple weeks back out of their health and PE classes, and really feel like it's a super important thing that we get some consistent messaging between our students and our parents. So without further ado, let me get started and take you through everything. So where are we going to start with this process? This is a pretty theoretical presentation about here are some factors that we know are going to be important as students go through their search process. And we've come to a lot of this information that we are putting in this presentation through conversation through the years with the students that come back and see us and give us the anecdotal feedback that we really have come to value through the years. And the first thing is that this is not a one-size-fits-all. If you're approaching this from how do I maximize, what's the best name that I can get into here without giving much other kind of concern to is this actually the right fit for me? Does this school offer me the best opportunity to learn the way that I know I learn best? So if we're just talking about how do we maximize the name, I don't think we're necessarily doing the college process correctly. So what are we going to do? Here's the general timeline for how everything unfolds. We're going to do this meeting today, and this will put the cap on everything in terms of everybody having the information. We've already begun to meet with juniors individually to answer the theoretical questions that we posed when we presented this information to the juniors, and we answered individually about each student. And then they can leave our office with a list of like 20 or 30 schools to do some research on online, and then hopefully create a visiting schedule with you all as parents to between now and September to get out and see as many places as they can. And that's how ultimately you will create your college list. So obviously we're starting now. We encourage the kids to, utilize the people in their social circles, in their, as parents in your friend circle, but not to take information blindly. Always to ask why. Oftentimes we hear, Billy's brother told me not to go to Penn State because, it was terrible. Oh, I would never go to Penn State. It's so big and you can't get any personal attention. Nothing, good is going on there. Now, meanwhile, maybe your son or daughter is hearing that information and they're thinking, my parents both went to Penn State, and one of the things I was looking forward to most was that big school experience with 110,000 other people at a football game. And, I'm a very independent learner, so I don't require much one-on-one time with a professor or a teacher in order to be successful. So always asking why people who are lending their opinion to you why are they lending it? What's their experience been? Talking about just a little bit of vocabulary now as we move on. Kind of posed this to the kids. I said, tell me what a liberal arts school is. Give me an example. And, also what is the kind of the tagline that often goes along with it's blank liberal arts school. And obviously the answer to that would be small liberal arts school. And, stereotypically the kids gave a lot of the same answers of, insert your small New England college here, Middlebury or Bates or Amherst, a lot of schools like that. And then to a lot of their surprise, when I said, what else is a liberal arts school? Rutgers, Ohio State, Penn State. Liberal arts colleges are basically what we think of as college when we, just in general invoke the names of colleges. It simply means that we could study English and we could study biology. We could study engineering, or we could study television production. There's a lot of different things that we could do at a liberal arts college, wide variety. The Ivy League schools, we tend to, put them in a place, it's the good schools. And when I explained it to the students that the Ivy League is actually an athletic conference, and certainly all the schools that play in that athletic conference are very exceptional academic schools, and that is typical of athletic conferences throughout the country. It's just a simple way for us to group schools together. To go back to that small college reference I was making earlier, to the Amhersts and the Williams and the Trinities and the Tufts and the Bates of the world, they all play in the same athletic conference. It's called the NESCAC, New England Small College Athletic Conference. And the reason why we group these schools this way is because, when you play in the same athletic conference, typically you want to have a relatively level set of competition. So schools with similar academic goals will oftentimes align themselves, and this way they're competing for the same type of student, and it tends to lend itself to be a little bit more of a fair set of competition, both academically and athletically. Public versus private schools, the only thing to really understand there as a resident of the state of New Jersey is that there are 7 public schools in the state of New Jersey, and public schools in general, they're state funded, tend to be typically a little cheaper, even though New Jersey public schools are not insanely cheap. Many would argue they are more expensive than perhaps certainly many other states. But the 7 colleges, which are public institutions in New Jersey, from north to south, you have William Patterson, Ramapo, Montclair State, Rutgers, the College of New Jersey, Rowan, and Stockton. And those schools are about $35,000, $37,000 a year. That's the total cost of tuition if you were to go live there, room and board, meals, all that stuff. You'd say, all right, that's not that cheap, which it's not. But if you then look at, different schools, which we'll look at in a minute, which are more like in the $85,000 range, 37 doesn't seem so bad. And where are things different in our liberal arts schools versus other school types? So down here, music conservatories. Obviously, you're going to be a musician, or you're going to using something heavily music intense when you graduate from a music conservatory. Art schools, same kind of thing. Culinary schools, you're going to be a chef. Technical schools, business, engineering, no English majors at Stevens Institute of Technology, at New Jersey Institute of Technology, Rochester Institute of Technology, Worcester Institute of Technology. So when you start to add those monikers in there, that's the difference between a liberal arts school and a more specialized institution. Continuing down the vocabulary track, because this is going to get to, and we're going to spend a lot of time on early decision here in a moment, because I think there's a common misconception out there about early decision, and we're going to debunk some of those myths in a minute. But for those of you who don't know, and I think most of our students certainly had an awareness, at least, that the common application is something that exists. For those of you who don't know, and this is maybe the first time through the college application process, the Common Application is a website that 1,100 or so schools in the country will accept as the application for their institution. It is not a less than application. It is like the most widely accepted application that there could possibly be. And we love the Common Application because it integrates perfectly with Naviance. It allows us to track and send transcripts, letters of recommendation, our school profile, and gives updates to when those items were sent, were they delivered, were they downloaded. The Common Application is a great thing, so you don't need to spend time entering your name, your address, where did you all as parents go to school, what a lot of the logistical information you need to only enter one time. And then for each of the institutions to which you'll apply using the Common Application, they might have a couple of supplemental questions that maybe say, in 250 words, tell us, and then ask a question. In 100 words, tell us why you want to come to specifically the College of New Jersey. So things like that. Early decision, obviously we can only apply to one of these because it is a binding contract. As parents, you will sign off that says if your child is getting in, they will attend. They sign the same thing, and I signed a notification. I will sign a notification if you apply early decision that also stipulates that should the student get into the institution that they will attend. So we're only applying to one of those potentially, and I should note that the vast majority of our students will not apply to any school early decision. And I'm going to get more into that in a second. Early action is just simply applying in the fall. You can apply to as many as you want, and if you get in, you don't have to go. I'll skip over the restricted for a second and come back to it. Regular admission, same thing. We're just applying January 1, February 1 of the deadlines. Apply to as many as you want, non-binding admission. Rolling admission simply means if you apply and they get your application, they will review it immediately and get back to you as soon as they have all of the application materials, and they can quite literally make a decision. So usually about a month or so is the turnaround time for that. So restricted early action and priority admission are kind of like a couple of gimmick deadlines, and I use that term intentionally. For example, Princeton has restrictive early action, and they say, okay, you can apply to this very exclusive deadline for us, and if you do that, you can still apply to other places in the country, but they have to be public institutions. You agree by using this application deadline that you will not apply to any other private colleges. Why do they do that? It is to their advantage. Like Princeton specifically would want you to not apply to any other Ivy League school in the fall, because they would believe that should you have the meet the criteria for admission to Princeton and they let you in, you are more likely to attend rather than spend time doing more applications when you've already been accepted to a great place. That's what they're banking on with that restrictive early action deadline. And priority admission is another one that's, hey, we'll give your application special weight if we do this. This is another of the great fallacies, which we'll expose in just a minute. But before we get to the early decision, I alluded to in the beginning of this presentation that we get feedback from alumni when they come back and talk to us, and that routinely happens. And through the years, I've been at Montgomery 18 years now, and routinely the two by far greatest factors that our alumni are telling us were the most important things about whether or not they were actually happy when they got to school was how big the school was in terms of the student population, and where that location of that school was relative to their support system. So, for students, a lot of students, they found out, well, I thought the location and how far away from my family and my support system that it was, I thought that didn't matter, but it turns out it mattered to me quite a bit. And I did not like that I could not get in the car, or someone, couldn't come get me within 4 or 5 hours if something, bad happened. And I realized I wanted to be a bit closer to home. And the size of the school is something that typically our juniors say, well, I don't care about that. And my response to it every time they say that is, I assure you that you do. Because freshman and sophomore year of college at a big institution like Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers is going to be spent in a classroom the size of our entire MPAC, and you'll be a number and not a name. Attendance most likely will not be taken. So if you are the type of student that knows that you need that personal attention to really succeed, or that if attendance is not being taken, that you probably won't go, then going to one of those larger institutions is probably not the right place for you. And now all these other items below it are certainly important factors that we should be considering, but the anecdotal evidence of how big and how far away from my support system is it are consistently the items that our kids come back and say, man, that was really what made me happy or made me not happy when I was at school. Okay, so now I really want to dive into the early decision situation. So this is most likely going to happen to everyone, either because the tour guide is going to say this to you, or someone from the affiliated with the college from an admissions standpoint is going to be giving a presentation in a conference room somewhere, or a dining hall or wherever, and they're going to say, just factually, almost 20% of our applicants that apply early decision are accepted, and only about 5% of our applicants in the regular decision pool are accepted. So it's definitely to your advantage to apply early decision. And that, if you just look at those numbers, you would say, well, yeah, okay, certainly to my advantage to apply early decision. And they want us to they say it, hoping we don't think about it in reality. Because if we ask ourselves the question, what's the implication of the statement here at the bottom? That the implication of almost 20% versus almost 5%, what do they want us to infer? They want us to infer that it is easier to get in. They want us to infer that the admissions criteria is somehow different, because that's what this is implying here, is that we changed the admissions standard in the early decision period. So I would argue we cannot accept that explanation and just be like, say, well, they told me here the admissions percentage is so much higher, so, well, I guess early decision is the better way to go. We can't. We can't accept it. So what I would encourage you all to do when you hear that statement is raise your hand and ask this question. What I hear you saying is you are lowering the admissions standard for early decision applicants, because that bad news here, you know what I mean? Because the admission rate skyrockets. We got to figure out what accounts for that statistical difference, because the bad news is schools do not lower the admissions standard for early decision applicants. So turn this into a bit of a conversation with the juniors when we were talking with them, and I said, give me some factors that if you walk down this road with me of trying to account for the statistical difference, what factors might account for the statistical difference? And I get a lot of very good answers that, like, well, there's less people applying in early decision. Agree. Does that account for a 15% almost difference in admit rate? I don't think so. What about the applicant pool is very qualified, so you have smaller applicant pool who is largely qualified? I agree with that statement too. 15% worth? I don't think so. Now we start to talk, about other factors that might account for this discrepancy. And what I'm going to tell you is, as I turn my phone off there, perils of real-time YouTube broadcasting, is if we need proof about this, let's talk about it. And I'm not going to take total credit for this, because it was actually a Reddit post that took me down this specific rabbit hole for this year, because I was looking for some updated information. But I want you to know that I did not accept Reddit and what someone wrote on Reddit as fact. I actually fact-checked all of this before I'm giving it to you, and I utilized a government website that reports out statistical data about athletics in college campuses. So it was the Department of Education's Equity in Athletics and Data Analysis website. And I'm using Swarthmore because I want to pick a very selective institution. So this is the class of 2027, so the current sitting sophomore class at Swarthmore. Swarthmore reported out that, the Department of Ed's athletics site reported out that about 32.6% of Swarthmore student body are athletes, and obviously you just look at the total enrollment at Swarthmore, you divide that by 4, about 134 athletes per class. This second bullet here is what Swarthmore told us. 2023, they accepted 216 applicants out of the almost 1,400 who applied in the early decision period, an acceptance rate of almost 16%. If you take out the 134 athletes, and obviously this is, we can't expect that every single one of the 134 athletes applied in the early decision period, but I would bet my bottom dollar that the vast majority of them did, because I understand how coaching works at the NCAA level, and college coaches are attempting to nail down their roster as early as humanly possible so that they can begin making budgetary, logistical travel plans. All that stuff happens much sooner than you would think about. It's not just something that happens a week out. These are things that are happening a year, 2 years out of actual competition. You remove those 134 athletes, the acceptance rate at Swarthmore, 6%. Swarthmore's regular decision rate of acceptance, 6%. If it's only 80% of those athletes that applied in the early decision period, the acceptance rate, 7%. So we're not talking about a ginormous difference here. And I'm using the athletes as the most glaring example because there's the most data to support what we know is already happening. But the athletes represent a larger population that we call the 100% admits. Students who, by the virtue of the service that they are providing to the institution, or another perk that is guaranteed to them, such as being a child of a sitting full-time faculty member, where you're guaranteed admission into the school. Those are the 100% admits who usually apply in the early decision period because there's no need to even wait past that deadline. So if we are looking to account for the admissions percentage discrepancy, you absolutely can point to the 100% admits, and that is where the discrepancy is solved. So why do they want us to think what they want us to think? Because we talked about the implication being that it's easier. Why do they want us to think it's easier to get in? Because they are seeking to control yield. Yield is, so if we think about the admissions process in a couple of different tiers, we have the total number of students who apply, and then we have a bunch of students who are accepted, which is obviously a smaller number than who apply, and then we have, of the students who are admitted, a smaller number than that who enroll. So the number of students who enroll and actually attend, that is what yield is defined as. So why do they care about yield so much? And I'll get into the specifics of all of these numbers in a second. Before any of this actually happens, in terms of admitting people and getting kids to commit, maybe a year prior to this, somebody will sit down in a room, usually the dean of admissions and some other, very important, the president of the college, some very important people, and they will say, well, what does the profile of our next incoming class need to look like? What do we want it to look like? What criteria have they met? And that's an arbitrary item. They can decide, and I'm making these numbers up now, this is not specific to Babson in the class of 2028. We need an average grade point average of 94.5, an average SAT score, that middle 50% between 1380 and 1420, and an average of 3 honors and AP classes. Okay, so if in order for them to have that be the profile of their incoming freshman class, the admissions department now knows that's what the profile of the the freshman class, what their higher ups want it to be. So now how do they best fill out the freshman class to meet that criteria? So if I've just talked about 100% admits accounting for a big part of the early decision pool, and those at least a portion of that 100% admit pool are providing an athletic service to the institution, which raises its profile, visibility, total number of applications are driven many times largely by athletics. In order to have that, perhaps there might be a grade point average that is 2 points lower than what the average projected profile might indicate, or SAT score might be 100 points lower than what the average prospective freshman they might want it to be. So now if we know that about a certain percentage of the 100% admits, early decision and promoting the fact that it's quote unquote easier to get in, that's what they want us to believe, could lead to more students applying in that period. And as we mentioned, that the kids always theorize, which is true, highly qualified applicant pool, smaller number of kids in that applicant pool. So how do we as an institution now, like as Babson, how do we get as many of that highly qualified, if not overqualified for the profile of our incoming freshman class, how do we get those kids to apply? And if we are already a pretty elite institution like Babson is, maybe if we tell everybody it's easier to get in and we just give them these numbers, then they will be more likely to say, well, all right, I'm just going to take a shot in the dark and try to, let's see if I get in. And for Babson, that's great, because now if we can accept some very high achieving students who are maybe above the average of that incoming profile that we have set, now we don't feel at all bashful about the fact that perhaps our best football recruit and our best basketball recruit are 100 points below that average of the profile that we are seeking. And now when we average all those things together, now we do still have that average profile of our incoming freshman class that we desire. So getting them to do that or getting the most kids to apply so they can fill out that profile is very important. The other reason why they care about that yield number is purely financial. So if we look at the 9,381 kids who applied in the class of 28 for Babson, they admitted almost 1,600 and they got 625. So almost 40% of their 1,595 chose to enroll at Babson. And now I don't know this at all for a fact. I haven't spoken to anyone at Babson, but I would bet that they're probably a little annoyed by the fact that they probably didn't hit 40%. Because I would bet that they are used to getting, it's too close to a round number to be a coincidence, they're probably used to getting that 40% yield. So cost of tuition being $82,126 times 625 students, that's $51,328,750. So now the number of actual bodies in the classroom that account for the difference between whatever 625 is compared to the number that would get this percentage up to 40% in terms of their yield. Let's say it's 5 students. That's 5 students times $82,126. We're talking about $410,000 that they're probably under budget in terms of their income here. And then what does that mean? They have to dip into their endowment, which is essentially their savings account, to get that $410,000. And nobody likes dipping into the savings account when they can get the money from somebody else. So controlling yield while maintaining the integrity of the prospective incoming freshman application profile. That is what this whole early decision game is about. Now, you might be sitting there listening to this thinking to yourself, Mr. Glock does not like early decision. He thinks that it's a crock. And that is not what I'm here to tell you. I'm here to tell you that I love early decision. And I love it for a very specific subset of my students. I love it for the students whose families can afford to pay full price to the institution, because colleges and universities are under no obligation to give you financial aid. However, you have already signed a binding contract that says you're going to attend, so they might say, okay, that's great, you're going to pay full price. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that the place that you're applying is absolutely by far your number one school that you want to attend. So as long as it's number one and you can afford it, I'm all about it. Let's go, because it just makes it logistically easier. You get the acceptance and then you're done. You don't have any guessing games. Outside of that, the last question I asked the students about early decision was relative to those financials. Can I get out of an early decision agreement? Let's say I can't afford it. Well, the key to understanding where this all falls in is you don't get to decide as the family whether or not you can afford it. The institution decides whether or not you can afford it. They basically, by filling out the FAFSA and oftentimes in early decision applications, the CSS profile, which is a more complicated, longer version of the FAFSA, they have a very good understanding of income, assets, and there's a chance that you may say, hey, listen, we want out of this early decision agreement because we can't afford it. And they say, hold on, let us go look at the information you provided to us. I'm like, oh, that's great. You have a boat? Sell your boat. Come to Babson. And they're within their right to do that. So they are the ones that are deciding whether or not you're going to be able to attend or not. So now we're past the early decision things, but please keep the early decision piece in mind because, and you know what, I guess I should say this too, because this will explain why I spent so much time talking about this. Every year for the last 17, this is my 18th year at Montgomery again, and every year, unfortunately, in the last 17, I've had at least one student in tears on my couch saying, I know you told me that there wasn't an admissions decision advantage and I just applied to this school because my parents made me, or like it was a huge name, but like I really wanted to go to this school over here, which also is a great school with a great name, but I didn't think I was going to get into this one over here that I applied early decision to, and now I have to go to this early decision school and I don't want to, and that's hard for me as a counselor when I fully know that we could have seen this coming. So I'm encouraging, if not imploring, everyone. The question that gets asked of, I don't know which school should be my early D school, because everyone believes in this admissions advantage. I can't tell you how quickly I want you to throw that notion in the garbage, that you should have an early D school. It's just not how this process works when it works well. Okay, so now as we look to how do we understand then what a great fit might be, and I would tell you that you have to get on campus. You have to see these places. Your children are gonna take a tour, and they're gonna be shown something, and they're gonna say, "Wow, that was really cool. I love that." And then they'll see another thing, and they'll say, "Wow, I love that thing too." And then you guys are gonna go on another visit to a different place, and the tour guide is gonna be, wrapping things up, and you're gonna raise a hand, and they're gonna say, "Well, do you have this?" Insert whatever the cool thing was over here that they saw at one of the other places you visited, and the tour guide's going to say like, "Oh no, that's not, we don't have that here, or we don't do that." And that's how our kids end up developing the hierarchy of their college list of where they might want to attend. So please get on campus and understand when you're going. If you are visiting colleges on a Sunday morning in early February and it is 6 degrees outside, I assure you that campus is going to be dead. It is going to look like nothing is going on. No one even goes there because they're all either asleep or hibernating because of how cold it is. By proxy, if you go to that same place on the first warm Friday afternoon in April, I promise you, in the same ways that campus was dead, that campus will be alive. Just the energy of that first warm spring day in the afternoon is... it's just crazy. So, money. I'm going to talk about money for only like 2 seconds. This second bullet here, do not let the initial cost of college dissuade you from applying. And that is mostly because we don't know what the actual cost of the institution is going to be until after you get accepted and you potentially get for, a private school. Hey, you went to Montgomery. We love your academic profile. Here's $15,000. So now a school that you thought was going to be 80 is really now 65, and maybe you could afford 65, but you couldn't afford 80. So it may bring certain places into better focus after you get the acceptance and the financial package. So we spent a lot of time talking about what you're looking for in colleges, what your students should be looking for in colleges, and how they accomplish that. But what are the schools looking for in our kids? Most of our students believe that their grade point average is the number one thing that colleges care about, and I assure you it's not. What classes did I take and what grades did I get? Did I challenge myself appropriately if I'm a very successful student by taking honors and AP classes? And by the same proxy, did I take a whole bunch of honors AP classes, but I didn't do well? Like, I can make a very clear argument that the student who just pushed to take honors in AP classes and got a couple of high C's and maybe 3 or 4 low B's is not nearly as attractive a candidate as one who took maybe 2 or 3 honors in AP classes and got 91s in those classes, and all the rest of their classes throughout 4 years were college prep level classes, and they got 93s and 94s. Now all of a sudden that translates to a very consistent transcript that challenges appropriately, and shows just success. So that's what we care about. For the schools that are taking SATs and ACTs again, and that's certainly coming back. A lot of schools are still test optional, but the notion that there is no value in these standardized tests is a fallacy. But and I think it's it's okay now because, and I'll talk about prep in a little while, because there's some pretty good opportunities for prep for people of all income levels at this point. So we're flattening out a lot of the potential inequities that came with standardized testing throughout the years. Grade point average is probably third. And I, in fairness, I should probably move essay and writing samples maybe like either down here to put it in, either the bottom of this category or maybe its own category up here, because all the other stuff, recommendations, what activities did I do, did I volunteer, things like that, they're important, but they are much less important than the items here and the essay. And I will also tell you that the activities that you participate in, unless you're being recruited to do those activities at the college or university, there is not a ton of intrinsic value in just that you have done it. Checking the box that you have done some of those items is virtually meaningless, because the chances that your experience in having done something is going to be there's a high probability that that is going to exist relative to most of the other applicant pool. So where does that, the activity, being the president of this, or a 3-year letter winner on the track team, or a 4-year participant in this, where does that have value? It has value in this essay and writing sample, because if our students are just saying, hey, you should accept me because I'm a responsible kid and I work really hard. If that's what your essay says, that those two things exist about you, why should anybody believe that it exists? Your essay is the place for our students to show that they are responsible, to show the examples that they are hardworking. And those things only come through being part of something that is bigger than themselves. These things which are not quantifiable, that they don't receive a grade in. How do you show that you are a human being that cares about others, that was a leader of others? It's certainly the best leaders I know have never once in their life told everybody else that they're a good leader. They just lead. And you learn how to lead. You learn how to do by being a part of things that you don't always get to lead right from the first moment that you walk in the door. When you're a part of a lot of things, you have to work your way to the top of it, understand what each of the positions entails, so that you can then have a meaningful experience with which you can write about in your essay and show the college who you are. As we continue to walk down this road of the application and showing them what you're all about, parents, I cannot say this as plainly as the day is long. If you are thinking about picking up the phone to call a college on your child's behalf, I cannot tell you how big an error that is. First off, do research. This last bullet on the left here, most of the questions that everyone has are listed on the school's website. Now, if you can't find it anywhere on the school's website, and it's a question you really need answered before you apply, your child needs to pick up the phone and call, because the schools care about who communicates with them. If you are the one doing the communicating, it is a red flag to them that if the student is struggling when they get to college, that they will run to you first, that you will begin to get involved in spaces where the college is not legally allowed after your child turns 18 to communicate with you in terms of these official matters, because all the correspondence will go to your child, regardless of the fact that you're paying the bill. Like, they don't want to hear from you. They want to hear from the kids. After you get into a school and financial aid is involved, money's involved, that's when you can logically get involved to have a dialogue with, a finance department to say, hey, we got into this school and your school. We really want to come to your school. This is, the financial package that we received, and you provide that to them and say, how close can you get us to this? Like, you're $4,000 off. Can we do some work? So, that's a conversation that private colleges will have with you, and that's when you should get involved. And I'm not saying that that's successful every time, but it's certainly a conversation worth having. talked about SATs and ACTs a little bit. It is your and your child's responsibility to register for these tests, and then next year during the application process to send these scores. Obviously, the registration process and the sending of the scores costs money. We do not include them on our transcripts or anything like that. Students will self-report a lot of these, like directly into the Common Application. They'll type in their scores and stuff like that, but nothing is official in that capacity unless it is sent by like officially through these websites like collegeboard.org and actstudent.org. Prepping for these tests. I alluded to the prep programs kind of flattening things out a little bit, and I believe it's true. There are some very good free programs out there. You may not even realize, since the first week of school, there have been free SAT prep classes in critical reading and in mathematics happening every Tuesday and every Thursday, just like after school help. Absolutely free. It is not a class insofar as there is a beginning and an end. It is a very much like drop-in type scenario where the teachers, and the critical reading is, I believe, Kim Marshall from our foreign language department, and in mathematics, I believe it's shared by Mahela Tinjeri and Neetu Sinha, that they will meet your child where your child is. Hey, this is my second time taking it. I'm taking it in a week. I want to, brush up on some of the math, relative to this topic, and they'll help you out. Hey, I've never taken one before. I've never prepped before. I'm just starting out. Great. Here's where we're going to start. And you can do that as many times as you need throughout the entirety of the year, Tuesdays and Thursdays, just like after school help. If you need test prep programs, and you have the money that you want to pay for that stuff, that's all well and good. There's virtual SAT prep in groups. There's in-person group classes. There's virtual one-on-one tutoring. Everything that you could think of, obviously, in 2025 exists out there. Whether it's Revolution Prep or a different, one of the test prep services out there, and Khan Academy, another free one, a fantastic resource that is directly integrated with College Board to help children prep for the exams. That was a thing that I think years ago when Khan Academy and College Board kind of started, announced that they were going to partner together, that there were a lot of us in education who were a bit skeptical about the usefulness of that potentially, and they have outperformed our expectations like greatly. A really, really good program. So, make use of it. Naviance is going to be another incredibly useful tool. If your students do not know how to log into Naviance, just have them shoot us an email, and we will either reset their password or just provide it to them. And the thing that we love about Naviance is you can conduct a college search in there, and that's all well and good, and we can help your child with that as well. But this is the slide that I think is the thing that shows what is most useful about Naviance. So what you're looking at here is the College of New Jersey over the last 5 years, and each of the points on this scatter plot are an actual Montgomery High School only student. And across the x-axis on the bottom is standardized testing, and the y-axis here is grade point average. So once your child has a standardized testing score, whether it's ACT or SAT, and you can switch that right up here, let's say, that your child gets 1,200 on the SAT and they have a 90 grade point average. So right about here, there would be the profile, like kind of a silhouette of a profile picture here of a human head. And then you'll notice, okay, well, this is me. What am I around? I'm around a bunch of rejections. I'm around a deferral, and also I'm around a bunch of acceptances. So TCNJ with a 90 and a 1,200 is probably a target school for me. And as we start to move into the areas over here, we start to see a lot more green check boxes. So now we see that we're moving more into the safety range for the College of New Jersey. As long as we've had at least 2 students apply to any particular college in the country in the last 5 years, you will have access to this scattergram in Naviance. And there's a section at the top when you click on colleges, it just says graphs. So that's where you would click to get to that stuff. Every year we have like 125 colleges that come and visit us. The actual person who is reading applications will come here, and they will, basically sit and give our kids a presentation and, see what's, tell them what they're looking for. Have a little bit of FaceTime. It's a great thing. Kids can sign up through Naviance. It usually happens during lunch. It's pretty good. Some helpful websites for the college search are right in here. I don't know that we need to teach anybody how to use the internet at this point. And my final thoughts on the college search. You're going to leave our offices. Your children will, if they choose to come and meet with us, with a bigger list of 20 schools. Do the research, pare it down to 10 to 12. Go and visit as many as you can. Show back up in September with that list, 8 to 10. If you're applying to you're a very high achieving student, you're applying to the very most selective institutions in the country, maybe, 10 to 12. That feels like a good, thorough search process. And then we'll teach you in September. We're going to do another webinar just like this and show you how to apply. We'll give you exactly the information you need about what you need to do to make the process itself work. And then the last thing I'll say is, don't lose sight of the fact that this journey with your kids can be and should be fun. These road trips that hopefully you will take to see some places should be enjoyable for the student athletes out there. They're going to be meeting with coaches who are going to tell them how wonderful they are and how much they want them to attend their college or university. Like, enjoy the heck out of that. It's a fantastic opportunity for the kids. And I'm going to try to pull up my YouTube here because I did not have the chat open, though I know Miss Appel was answering some items in the chat, I believe. And we'll see. Just want to make sure I answer everybody's questions, should there have been any. And I would like all messages. Okay. All right. Well, looks like we're okay. All right. And feel free to contact your college counselor or your student's counselor here for anything you need college related wise, and we're happy to help you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and have a